Hi, this is the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. And today we're going to talk about what David Keirsey called the Pygmalion Project in his book, Please Understand Me Too. Now, David Keirsey is probably the most popular writer of the Myers-Briggs system. I liked Keirsey's work. It was what introduced me to the Myers-Briggs system like a million years ago. And at the same time, there were some things about Keirsey's work that I wasn't 100% on board with. He didn't really like the concept of cognitive functions, which is our bread and butter. We love cognitive functions. But one of the things of brilliance, or one of the components of brilliance that I think he really brought to awareness when it comes to personality psychology is this concept of the Pygmalion Project.
Yeah, and Keirsey, he also he made things accessible for people. I think that's one of the reasons why he was so popular. His writings were popular is because it was accessible for most people to pick up a book and go through it, and basically access some of the personality typology information, when the books came out. So what is the Pygmalion Project?
So the Pygmalion Project is this concept that polarity creates attraction. And then once we're attracted, by that we mean two personality types of very, that are basically opposites. Opposites attract, actually. Polarity creates attraction is just a fancy way of saying opposites attract. So when it comes to personality type, opposites attract, then they get into a relationship with each other, and suddenly the thing that created or generated the initial attraction now becomes intolerable. Like, we're not okay with it anymore. And we start chipping away at the other person because we're trying to make them more like us. Now, Pygmalion was a character in Greek mythology who crafted chiseled, really, his perfect woman out of marble, and she came to life. And then I believe the original My Fair Lady, the original manuscript or the play was called
Pygmalion.
Pygmalion, right. Because the doctor was trying to craft the perfect woman. He was going to take this, this gutter rat and turn her into the most perfect woman and then present her to society, and none of society would be able to know her humble beginnings because he would do such a great job crafting her into the ideal woman, high society woman. And then they turned it into, a movie, and it's called My Fair Lady with
Rex Harrison and
Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah.
That's the variation of My Fair Lady that I'm familiar with. I don't know if they've done any other incarnation. But it's this concept that we take somebody and we turn them into our perfect ideal. And unfortunately, as Keirsey mentions, that perfect ideal is us. We want to turn them into a variation of us.
Yeah, it's really looking at somebody's differences, and often, like Antonia said, you're attracted to the differences between you and the person that you're attracted to. Opposites attract, the differences attract. And then it seems like once you get into a relationship with this person, those differences now are no longer viewed as differences, they're viewed as flaws. They're viewed as deficiencies instead of differences. So I look at you as a partner or a lover, and now the thing that I saw as this really unique quirk is now this thing that I've got to correct or fix in you before we can get on with our relationship, because it is a terrible thing you're bringing to the table. When that was probably one of the things that attracted me to you in the first place. And so this idea of how do we deal with, this comes up for me when I'm in a relationship with you. There's things that you do that I'm like, well, I got to fix her. I got to make her more like what I'm like. And I'm sure it's the same back from you. How do we deal with this in relationship? How do we handle wanting to quote unquote fix somebody and make them more palatable to us when it's just a difference? And we think that understanding personality type can be one of the ways this is done, because you understand this is just fundamentally different how this person thinks and feels about something.
Yeah, exactly. Keirsey's concept was that the more we understand the other, the less we'll try to fix it. And my observation has been that we have a tendency to not see two different behaviors or resulting or emergent behaviors. One is acceptable to us and the other one isn't. And when we don't understand that both of these emergent behaviors come from the same root, we try to change the root. We don't know that root, that one part of the way the person thinks or the way they experience reality or see reality is emerging both the thing that we love and the thing that has become unacceptable to us. So then we try to fix that root, not realizing that stamping down the thing we don't like, if we actually succeed, will also snuff out the thing that we do love.
Yeah.
So being able to understand that root is a big piece of not wanting to, quote unquote, fix the other person.
This is a great example from business. I was just consulting with someone this past week, a business person who owns a business, and they were talking about looking for a new employee for their business. They were talking about this one position. It's a detail administrative position. And they said, I want the person in this position to be very flexible, to be very free-form, to be very open about time and flexibility. And I told this person, I said, listen, if you hire someone that is good at paperwork and administration and the details, they're probably not going to be as flexible as you want them. So that flexible person you might get in here might not be detail-oriented. So the thing that you like about them being detailed and on the stick and getting things done in a timely manner and really working with paperwork and that administrative mind is probably also going to be the same person that wants to leave at 5 o'clock. They're not going to want to be as flexible with their time or come in on weekends because they structure things externally, if that's their personality type, most likely. So the thing that you love about the person you're going to hire, the thing that they're going to do great at their job, is the thing that you're also saying, I wish they weren't like this so much. But they come in tandem with each other often.
Yeah, it's almost like, I think looking at it in terms of hiring somebody is such a great example or expression of this. I'll read Craigslist advertisements for new employees.
Yeah.
And the employer is like, I'd like somebody who's good at everything.
Yeah.
I want somebody who unrealistically has no cost of specialization. I want them to be totally organized, and I want them to be a multitasker. I want them to be able to focus on one thing and see it through, and I want them to be incredibly flexible and be able to jump from project to project. Like, I mean, they don't say that specifically, but those are basically the characteristics they're looking for. And it's like, look, if they've got one of those, they're probably not going to have the other one because it's the cost of specialization. We focus on, we only have so much time and mental energy to allocate to certain skills.
Yeah.
And some of these skills are literally directly in opposition of each other, right? If you want somebody who's great at focusing, you're probably not going to get somebody who's an extraordinary multitasker.
Or a very idea generator, whiteboard, creative, frenzied, here's the new ideas. They're going to be more focused on getting the task done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you want somebody who can do the same mundane job day in and day out for 30 years, you're not going to get that person who's the idea generator writing on a whiteboard and coming up with new novel ways of looking at your business and yourself. If you've got that guy, you're probably also not, that idea generator, you're probably not going to have somebody who's very satisfied by seeing a project through. They're going to be more of an entrepreneurial style. So we get this idealism about how people behave in our heads. Mm-hmm. And we get this idealism about, I want somebody to be all things to all people, basically. And that is totally unrealistic. In fact, you as an employer are hiring somebody who's not you to make up for your deficiencies. So what makes you think that they had more time than you did to be able to build all these different skills?
Yeah.
Now, applying this to relationships, right? To, romantic relationships, we do the same thing to our mates. We go, I want you to be all the things I need you to be, right? I need you to, be totally in my head and be able to predict everything that I want. And at the same time, I want you to be able to give me personal space and not, intrude on my own, identity. And I want you to be able to work super duper hard and bring home the bacon. And I want you to be able to spend all this time with me. We get this really crazy idealization of this perfect mate that can't exist in our current time-space continuum. That's just not possible. And what it usually comes down to is not even so much that we want the mate to be all things for us at all times. It's more that we want them to be us.
Yeah.
Right? I'm thinking about this thing right now, so I want you to be thinking about this thing right now. I'm in this space where I'm working on this thing, so I want you to be working on that too. I want you to be a clone of me, reflecting back to me, my reality at all times. And it's simply, well, first of all, it's not realistic. And second of all, be careful what you wish for. Because if you actually got that, you would hate that person. They would be so boring. There would be no polarization. There would be no opposite. There would be no other for you to sustain attraction.
I would say, I would give a little nuance to that. You may not hate that person. You might craft them into the person that you kind of want them to be and force them into that, but they'll probably hate themselves and hate you.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to hate somebody in that situation. In other words,
True.
you know, because I've been in relationships before where I've really molded myself to what the other person wanted, and I denied some true tendencies of my own. And I was mad. The other person got some of their needs met, and then I didn't. I had to take the hit on that. So I didn't feel as happy as I could be being present in my own self, and they were somewhat happy, but they would have probably appreciated me to show up at the table with the skills I brought, and it just didn't work out as a relationship because of it. So I think that you can, for a time, sustain some of that malleability, but somebody's going to be unhappy in the midst of it because that's not what initially attracted you. And quite frankly, the thing that we appreciate in a loving relationship, a lover relationship, is the differences that person brings, the perspective differences, the way they do things. You want enough similarities that you're at least have, you know, a basic worldview. But then from there, the excitement is the differences, the nuances, the quirks, the quote unquote, I'll call them flaws when I don't think they're actually flaws, but the things that are you would perceive as flaws in the other person or deficiencies, they're just differences and uniquenesses and quirks, and these can be appreciated and loved. And looking for ways to appreciate and love these even more. And hey, this is the way the person, you know, expresses this, or this is the way they do this way, and I love them for the way they come to the world.
This is why I believe that models can work and help out so much in relationships, because models help us figure out what the root cause of these behaviors are, and to be able to sort of chart back the etymology of why we see what we're seeing. And then ask ourselves if we actually really appreciate that etymology, if we actually appreciate that root cause, if we really understand it. I think the answer is generally yes. So one example of this would be, you know, it's really common actually for introverts and extroverts to get together in a relationship, in friendships too. But in a relationship, I think it's extremely common for one person to be an introvert and the other person to be an extrovert. Now, one of the things that introverts really appreciate about extroverts in a relationship is that the extrovert, first of all, does usually more talking, so they find that interesting. They like the energy of the extrovert. They like that the extrovert, you know, consciously or unconsciously pushes them out of their shell and forces them to go experience things that they might not have chosen to do before. So there's a lot of things about an extrovert that an introvert really appreciates. But then there's also the wanting to go out all the time and the not being happy being at home 24/7 and maybe talking too much when the introvert wants some alone time, or always needing to be around the person, or whatever it is. So the introvert gets attracted to the extrovert's energy and then gets in a relationship with them, and suddenly the introvert is very unhappy because that energy also brings with it a bunch of stuff that's unfamiliar to the introvert. So now the introvert wants to force the extrovert to be more introverted like them. Maybe they're not consciously doing it. A lot of introverts feel like it would be wrong to try to force somebody else to be more like them, but they at least do it logistically, like by saying no to activities, right? Like, no, I don't really want to go do that. And the extrovert doesn't want to do it alone, so now the extrovert is staying home with the introvert. Sure. So even if they're not forcing them on a personality level to be different, they're at least logistically hamstringing their ability to go be more extroverted with their mate. Vice versa. Extroverts love that introverts are more introspective usually, that they have a more patient way of interacting with reality, that they're more thoughtful, right? They appreciate all of these introverted...
They don't steal my spotlight when we're in public.
Right. Right. You don't have to steal the limelight. So there's a lot of things about an introvert that an extrovert really appreciates, but then they get in a relationship with them and they're like, hey, let's go do this, and let's go do this, and let's go do this. And the planning, the social planning ends up being that the introvert doesn't get any alone time. And if the introvert is constantly trying to accommodate the extrovert, then now the introvert has massive needs going unmet, and the extrovert just doesn't get it. So now the extrovert is trying to make, at least on a logistical level, maybe not on a core level, but on a logistical level, they're trying to force the introvert to be more like them. Now, there's a balancing act here. It is good for an introvert to become more extroverted. That's actually how they develop that co-pilot process that we talk about in the car model. Their co-pilot process is an extroverted process. So the more they develop that process, the healthier they become. And vice versa. It's important for an extrovert to slow down and give themselves enough time to develop their co-pilot process, which is going to be an introverted process. So it's actually healthy for these two people to encourage each other to, explore the other world on a regular basis. That said, there's going to be profound fundamental needs that an extrovert has that an introvert will never have, and vice versa. So it's not a matter of changing the person to become more like you. It's more appreciating the root, right? The root is that I'm an extrovert. I need a lot of social time, or at least getting out in the world time. I need a lot of, engagement with my outer world. And I have a need that if I'm at home too much, or if I'm doing too many introverted activities, I'm going to start getting kind of down and depressed. And that's the same root that you as an introvert love with my energy and my vivaciousness and, my getting you out of your shell. That has the same root. So as opposed to going, you need to be more introverted like me, I'm going to offer some space to go, why don't you go do that without me? Right? Like, you have a need, and right now I have a need to be alone. So why don't you go do that thing without me? And vice versa. The introvert has needs that the extrovert will never not truly understand. So when the extrovert is constantly pushing the introvert to go out and not have introverted alone time, then the extrovert is doing the introvert a disservice. Mm-hmm. And so the extrovert going, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and get some alone time tonight? Right? Like, why don't I just leave you, the house, and I'll just go out with the kids, or if we don't have kids, I'll just go out alone and I'll go hang out with my friends, and that's okay. And now we both get our needs met. Now, the problem is not getting, of course, into that dynamic too much, right? Like, you need to keep the balance. You don't want the extrovert always leaving the house and the introvert always staying home. That's not going to be very healthy either. But realizing that you don't actually have to change the other person. You have to figure out how to get their needs addressed and met at the same time without stepping on their toes.
Yeah. I think the way I look at it is, so this idea of the Pygmalion Project, where we get together somebody that attracts us and then we try to fix them, being aware of that, saying, hey, I'm not gonna come to the table trying to quote unquote fix my mate or my partner. I'm gonna look at it as a frame of, how can I use this to grow? Like, the ways that are bugging me, the issues I think are problems or deficiencies or flaws, how can I learn to appreciate those? Fundamentally, they attracted me. There's something there that's attractive about them, because these are differences that probably drew me into the relationship. How can I truly appreciate this about other people and about this person I'm in a loving relationship with? How can I learn to grow? And like you said, it's a growth state. Depending on what your personality is, the person that you're in a relationship with some of the things that you see as flaws in the way they do things, it might be a growth state for you to entertain some of that rather than trying to fix them. That could be a huge growth tool for you in the relationship. So to come at it from a perspective, as you're listening to this, come out to the perspective that I could use this as a growth tool for me, I think is a very powerful frame. And I try to think about that in my relationships, whether they're romantic, friendship, family, whatever they are. How can I see the other person, the thing that's driving me crazy? Is there something here I can learn from and I can grow into through this?
Yeah, you and I had an argument recently.
You did?
Yeah. It was actually not too bad. Our arguments are actually rather tame and quite neutered, I think, in comparison with arguments I've had with other people in the past that I've been in relationships with, before I really got into personal development. But that doesn't mean that you and I are not going to experience conflict. And we had conflict recently because I've been in a situation where, we had a lot of sickness this last month. You got sick. I got sick. Just like sickness just clung to us like crazy. And, we got behind on work and we got behind on correspondence. So I feel like I've got all these people I'm supposed to correspond with. And I just, and it went weeks without really, doing a lot of things that I felt like I was obligated to do. And then on top of that, my parents came to visit us to visit our child, to visit Piper. And I have a strained relationship with my parents. I'm not in the religion that I grew up in, and it's very difficult for them to accept that. And we were very laid back in our interactions with each other while they were here. And you predicted it, you called it. As soon as they got home, they wrote this big letter about how, they hurt their conscience by talking to me, and there was nothing that I did wrong. It was totally them, but it was wrong of them to have such a casual relationship with me, which, stung pretty bad. It's like, oh, we weren't dickheads to you, and that hurts our conscience. Like, you didn't do anything wrong, but we should have been dicks to you. And it's like, Just the holidays with all holidays are hardcore, right? Like we have our your kids, I have my stepsons, and trying to make it a great experience for them. And then right after that, holidays are work, right? When you're a parent, holidays are work.
Oh yeah.
So the work of the holidays, then sickness, then my parents, it was like, I'm spent, right? Like by the end of January, I'm so depleted, right? I'm just like, I have needs going perpetually unmet. And I'm just now able to even acknowledge them, because before I was just trying to, I was treading water. So then I'm acting kind of like a douchebag, right? Like when I have needs going unmet, I'm a thinker. I'm not very good at going, oh, I have needs going unmet. I'm better now than I ever have been in the past. But I'm a thinker female, and I just want to be left alone. Right? Usually females, apparently I've been told, because I'm not a feeler female, but I've been told that feelers usually want to talk over their emotions. They usually want to be understood, right? That's a whole stereotype of men and women where the woman just wants to be understood and the man wants to solve the problem. And she's like, you're not listening to me. And he's like, well, let's just do this. And it's like, well, if you really loved me, you wouldn't always provide solutions like I'm some sort of burden, right? That is the dynamic that has been painted to me in every show and cartoon I've seen since I was a little kid. And I'm a thinker female. I just want to be left alone. Like, I'll go figure it out on my own. I don't need to really talk about it. Sometimes I need to vent, but for the most part, I just want to be left alone for a while to work it out.
A connection would be a burden to you at that point, because it's something you're not good at, and like organically to connect and be emotive with someone.
Yeah, in fact, when you were trying to connect with me, because you're a feeler male, you were trying to connect with me thinking that was the need that was going unmet. And all I could do is look at you and go, what do I need to tell you in order to get you to feel good enough about us to go away and leave me alone, right? I think I actually literally said that. Yeah. I think I literally said, what do you want me to say to you so that you will go away and I will have some alone time? And it was so hurtful to you. You're looking at me like, I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to get your needs met. And all I can think is, I need alone time. Just let me go stew in my own juices. And so what's interesting about that is that behavior of wanting to connect with me because you want me to connect with you and get, what would normally be needs met for a feeler. Mm-hmm. That's the same thing that has you just, like, you are such an introspective genius. Like, you understand human emotion on a level that I've made peace that I will never understand it on that level. Like, I will never understand it. You are so masterful at emotional, what is the energy martial arts? Judo? Is it judo? Like, your emotional judo is on a level that I can't even begin to fathom. I'm so grateful of that component of you. And in that moment, I just want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. Right? So if I didn't understand that they came from the same place, I might try to start fixing you. Mm-hmm. I might try to start going, look, you need to be more like me. You need to be more of a thinker. You need to more understand that I need, some emotional space and what's wrong with you. As opposed to me looking at the situation and going, this is your genius. This is how you show up as an extraordinary human being. And in the moments of you showing up as an extraordinary human being, sometimes that's going to clash with my lesser self. So I'm going to go ahead and look at you. I mean, I said some hurtful things because I'm a dick. But once I got some, you just eventually looked at me and went, okay, I'm giving you some space and alone time. I'm like, God, finally. But then it didn't take long, right? And after a little bit of time of alone time, I came back and I'm like, okay, so I was kind of a douchebag back there, and I'm sorry that I was so douchey, and thank you for holding space. And then once I get my alone time and I'm in a more analytical space and less of an emotional space, right? And I'm just going on and on here about my experience, but I'm trying to this is an anecdote. Hopefully this is helpful. But once I got through that, then I'm like, can you help me figure out what I was going through? Mm-hmm. Can you help me figure out my emotions? Can you help me kind of figure out what was happening? And you did, and it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I think it's those moments. It's those moments when you're looking at the person going, I can't stand you right now, right? Understanding that the thing you can't stand is generally a representation of their genius that is just clashing with where you're at in the moment. Sure. It's not a deficiency for the other person. In fact, it is their brilliance that you're experiencing. It's just not what you need right now. Mm-hmm. So not going, because you're not the exact thing I need right now, somehow you're broken. Go, sometimes it's just a system error. Sometimes it's just what I need right now is not what you're able to offer right this second. And I know it will be in just a little bit, but right now I just need to go do this thing. And then when I come back, I'll be able to engage with your genius again.
As you're talking, something else came up for me too, that we often see different flavors manifesting in that behavior, and we lump it all together and we don't parse out where it is. So for example, you said that your interpretation for me is that I have emotional judo. I can take energy and manage my emotions and manage other people's emotions to the degree where I can help them express them or understand them in a way. And I would agree. I think, thank you for saying that. And I do believe that's something I'm good at and I like doing. But also coming with that in my personality type and being able to do that means that I also have the proclivity, or at least the ability, to be highly emotionally manipulative. Whether my intent is good or not, I'm able to persuade people by getting them to feel an emotion that I want them to feel. And hopefully my intent is always good in this. I get them to feel a positive emotion that's going to lead to positivity toward them. But I could see someone in a relationship with me saying, I see the ability you have to get me to feel an emotion or to almost feel manipulated. And not manipulated might be the wrong word, but to feel influenced or persuaded by these emotions. So now I can see it manifesting in that way. So even the other parts that I see as good, I'm lumping it all together and just I want to correct all of that in you because I can see that there's this potential for this. That's just an example of, I think we manifest, and your ability to clean slice information and data and really get down to the heart of an issue and understand what we're talking about also gives you the ability to be very cold, calculating, and a-hole to people sometimes. Like, you have the ability. I'm not saying you do, but the same thing. So if I see you being harsh towards someone and I'm not understanding that's an expression of your natural tendencies, you just happen to express it in a way that was harsh towards someone in this moment, I start thinking I've got to fix you. And I start going back to the root of what's causing that behavior of being harsh towards someone, trying to root out that very thing that's your superpower. At times when you're not being harsh with someone, I'm removing the ability for you to clean slice information. And same thing with me, the persuasion I bring to the table emotionally, you might see that as I got to get rid of this for this guy because this is a bad expression of this. He shouldn't be emotionally being persuasive or manipulative. So I'm going to go to the heart of it and get rid of it. But you're also removing the superpower of emotional judo that I have as well. And so there's this double side to this that I can see why people also fall into a Pygmalion Project of wanting to correct the other person. They see the negative and the positive expression of something, and they don't realize it's coming from the same place. So it's not the root you want to root out, it's that behavior you're addressing.
Well, and yeah, I think this is like what we talk about with all the cognitive functions, all these mental tools that we have. Every instrument can be used as either a tool for building or a weapon to break down.
Sure.
All right, like a hammer can be used to build a house or to bludgeon somebody to death. Right? Like we can use all instruments in either a positive or a negative way. And that includes the natural instruments that come with our personality types or any skill we've developed, regardless of our personality type. If we have proficiency in something, we can use it for good or for evil. And like basically what you're saying is that when we see something being used as a weapon, we want to remove the instrument from the person, not realizing that if we permanently remove that from them, we'd also remove their ability to build.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to realize that just because you're seeing a negative expression of something doesn't mean that that person is unable to wield that instrument, right? Mm-hmm. Like you shouldn't have to try to grab that from them. By the same token, I think it's also important to realize that a negative expression doesn't necessarily mean that that person is turning it into a weapon. Sometimes we can be using the instrument in a positive way, and it ends up, for us in that moment, appearing negative, but it might not be. It might just be the system. So seeing something that's different than us, it's really easy to assume that's a negative expression, especially if it's not suiting what we want in the moment.
Yeah.
But not making the assumption that this expression is necessarily negative, while also recognizing that sometimes the expression is going to be negative. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that you have to change the other person. It doesn't mean that you have to change them to be more like you. It means that you hold space for the differences. Remember that these differences are what created or generated attraction to begin with. And if the person ends up weaponizing their tools, like the things they're good at, if they end up weaponizing it, maybe just, pointing it out or recognizing it's going to happen sometimes. Maybe not pointing it out at the moment it's happening, because usually people are pretty defensive, but maybe later on going, hey, so, maybe the next time you do that thing, that was hurtful to me, or I found that to be not, conducive to what I needed in the moment. And maybe next time we can go about it a little bit differently, but not just jumping to the conclusion that they need to be fixed somehow.
Yeah, I think it's a very healthy way to come to a relationship. And again, I'll reiterate what I said before, that use this as a growth for yourself. Use this as a way, how can I learn and grow through this? Hold space for this behavior that's driving me crazy. I know this is how they show love, or I know this is a quirk of theirs that attracted me to them. And how can I go ahead and just embrace that and use this as a way for me to grow?
So one of the best ways to do this, I think, is by getting familiar with different personality types.
Yeah.
Or models. It doesn't even have to be personality psychology. Just models like, the Graves model, which is about understanding where a person's at in their development, in their personal development over a lifetime. Understanding models like Maslow's hierarchy, which is what needs are going unmet in the person. And what needs are going unmet in me, and how can we make sure that we're addressing our needs? We recently did a podcast on the 5 love languages, getting familiar with your mate's love language as well as your own love language. Being able to really utilize all of these resources to understand the other person as well as you can, not assume that you've got them down, not assume that you know everything about them, because a model will never be a complete picture of the person. Always leaving room for their individuality, their personal experiences, the things that they value, their interests. So never assuming you know everything about them and then turning that into a weapon, right? Well, you're just a blah, 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 and that's why you behave this way, right? Mm-hmm. Not using it that way. But using it to try to see the best in the other person, using it to be able to find their positive intent as opposed to an expression of their personality that you just don't happen to like in that moment.
Yeah, we get to choose how we interpret the way people behave toward us or what they do. We get to choose the narrative around what's happening. And you have that power in a relationship. As you're listening to this, you have a power to choose. This person did not have a negative intent here. They had a positive intent. And I'm going to choose to interpret it that way. Even though it's driving me crazy, I'm sure they did it out of love. I'm sure they put my clothes in this closet away where I can't find them because they love me, but I just see it as an annoyance because they put my clothes away and now I can't find what I need or whatever. But it was a way for them to express love to help you out maybe in something. So learn to see the person. And if you're in a relationship where you believe the person loves you and you love them, assume positive intent in those moments.
I've read in many articles now, some of them just, clickbait articles, and others like, legitimate journals that are peer reviewed. I've read in multiple different, places that one of the most important qualities you can bring to a relationship is looking for positive intent in your mate. Mm-hmm. Like assuming that everything they do is from love, looking for the positive as opposed to looking for how what they did was somehow an attack on you. Assuming everything comes from love and everything comes from positivity, that's a predictor of a long-term relationship.
And somehow it makes sense to this person doing it. Somehow that makes sense. With a behavior that makes no sense to you has to be making sense to them, or they wouldn't be doing that behavior.
Yeah. Whereas the Pygmalion Project is a predictor of the demise of the relationship. If you try to change the other person to be more of an ideal model, to be more like you, or any idealized model that you have, that's a predictor of the failure of the relationship.
Yeah. Have you had an experience of being in a Pygmalion Project relationship? Maybe you're in one now. Maybe your mate is trying to change you, or you're trying to change the person you're in a lover relationship with, and you've discovered this in yourself. You're like, oh, I see what's going on here. We want to hear from you. What's your story? We want to hear your story about your experiences in this through this idea of getting together with someone you're attracted to and then trying to mold and shape them, or maybe them molding and shaping you.
And alternatively, what are some of your stories about avoiding the Pygmalion Project? What are some of the mental habits you've cultivated, or some of the, skills you've built to make it so that you don't automatically try to change your mate? Or that you won't allow yourself to be changed. Because there's a lot of people who have a natural tendency to mold to their mate, right? Like they feel like they give up their identity to their mate. What are some of the things you do to make sure that you preserve your own unique individuality as both people, and at the same time have positive intent with each other? Make sure, like preserve your individuality, but not have that be World War III.
Yeah, just so you know, we're not opening up the community for a complaint desk for you to complain about your lover. we want to see positivity here. So you may not have all the answers, but just be respectful and positive in your framing. But we do want to hear your story. We want to hear your personal experience in this, because we feel the more the community can share with each other, and the more like minds here are sharing their personal experiences and personal stories, it's going to help.
Helpful strategies.
Helpful strategies. It's going to help all of us grow, because, I had this same challenge and here's how I solved it. Wow, that's interesting. I'm going to try that in my relationship. This kind of dialogue is powerful for us as a community here at Personality Hacker. We want you to be a part of it. So come over. One of the best places to do this is facebook.com/personality hacker. It's just a great discussion format. You can comment and like things, and it's a great place for us to discuss right now. So at the time of this recording, Facebook is very popular. So come over to facebook.com/personality hacker. You can also do some short 140 character discussion and community over at twitter.com/personality hack. And of course, the website, personalityhacker.com, has articles, book reviews, more of these podcasts, videos, tons of content and resource there for you to learn and also be a part of that community as well.
And a place to put a comment underneath this podcast.
Yeah.
Specifically about your experiences. So if you want to share on the website, please feel free to leave a comment there. And if you love our podcast, go to iTunes, subscribe to us, and leave a rating and a review. We love it when you review our podcast, and also give us ideas for what you'd like to see coming up in the future.
Yeah. So this has been the Pygmalion Project episode of Personality Hacker. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We're going to talk with you on the next episode.